They're in tears. They just look at it, and in Ukrainian, дуже гарно. They give me hugs, I give them hugs. It's just thrilling.
She didn't just do one family, but she did all the families, and I just thought that was such a generous use of her time.
The community response at that time was pretty incredible.
Green is the color.
This is the heartbeat of who we are.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of CBC Saskatchewan. We're reminiscing about some of our favorite stories of the past year, ones about community, kindness, courage, really the best of this province. Take Baba's Closet. When the Russian war on Ukraine broke out in February, Nettie Chernikensky started collecting donations. Then she opened a storefront. The idea was to give Ukrainians displaced anything they may need, from school supplies to dishes and towels, for free.
Я дуже дякую всім за допомогу.
Yeah, she really thankful for every help she got here. Yeah.
Now here are more Saskatchewan stories.
I'm Bonnie Allen, a senior reporter for CBC News, and one of my favorite stories this year was about a group of girls and young women who fled Afghanistan and who are building a life for themselves here in Saskatchewan. They once attended the progressive Marifat High School in Kabul, known for empowering and educating girls, and that made them a target when the Taliban seized control last year. Pushing those boundaries and shattering cultural norms put the spotlight on these young women. Mina Rezwani, an award-winning scholar. Benin Arjmand, an athlete who defied the patriarchy, excelling at martial arts, even showcased on YouTube. And Farhang Nassar, a singing sensation. So with the help of many people, this group of girls and their families managed to escape Afghanistan and come to Saskatchewan as government-sponsored refugees. But truly, it is the girls' courage and resilience that I find so inspiring. And one of the young women, Farhang Nassar, had to leave her father behind in Pakistan. They were separated for more than a year, but our camera was there in early November for their emotional reunion at the Saskatoon airport.
He is my everything. I want the government of Canada to bring him to me, and they made it happen. Thank you so much.
I just think we're so lucky to have these young women in our province, and it was such an honor for me to meet them and to share their story.
I'm CBC reporter Jason Warwick, and my most memorable story this year was the one that we did with students from Legacy Christian Academy here in Saskatoon. 2 years ago, the students came to me with some concerns but weren't comfortable going public. Well, that changed this summer when they spoke with myself, Yasmin Hanea, Jesse Anton, and other colleagues. We did a series of articles, and after those articles came out, many more students went to police with their complaints.
In August, someone sent her a threatening email.
It said, "Caitlin, it would be advisable for you to stop talking to the press if you value your life. Hebrews 12:29. If that's what their intention was to scare me into silence, that's not happening.
Erickson has been speaking with the press for months, trying to expose alleged abuse at a private Christian school in Saskatoon. She and others have filed criminal assault and abuse complaints against nearly 24 people connected to the school and church.
They launched a $25 million lawsuit. The provincial government stepped in and took over administration of the schools. Students are hoping that more is done, such as criminal charges. They're hoping that the school is shut down or at least have its public funding removed. And it stimulated a debate around Saskatchewan about the role of private versus public schools and how those should be overseen and funded.
Staff tried to physically and psychologically break me. Despite their best efforts, they were not successful, and that's why I'm able to stand here today.
I'm Sam Sampson. I'm a senior reporter for CBC based in Regina. And a surprising moment of joy that came out of this year was actually in the wake of the stabbings that happened in James Smith Cree Nation. And it has to do with the kids, and they were just having a lot of fun and so full of joy, while the adults around them were really feeling a lot of pain. So if you don't remember, on September 4th, 11 people were killed in Canada's worst recent mass stabbing. The man RCMP say is responsible for all of that died after he was arrested. And so the investigations on what happened continue. But in the wake of everything, different government people, different dignitaries came to James Smith Cree Nation to pay their respects, to be there for the community, including the Prime Minister. And when he was there, they had the kids, and I think grade 2 or 3 students, they lined up all in a row and they did a jig for him. And it was just one of those moments that you couldn't help but smile. And it reminded me of what there is to fight for in that community that has gone through so much this year. The people I've spoken with are focused on the next generation. That was the next generation. That's what they're trying so hard to make things great for in the future there. And it was just a really nice moment for everybody there after what happened.
My name is Alexander Kwan, and I'm a reporter here in Regina. One of the stories that struck me most this year was about Daniel Litvinenko. It's hard to launch a business during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's even harder still when you choose to actively pull products from your shelves. But that's what the owner of Eurodeli Kiev in Regina did when Russia invaded Ukraine, a country he once called home. Daniel chose to do this, even though the store had been open for only 2 weeks. Daniel told me that he couldn't bear to take $1 more for Russian products, while he still had friends and family, including 2 grandmothers, back in Ukraine.
We are not providing money to the Russian government or the Russian companies, so the rockets will not fly over our cities or our country. That our people, we're not supplying them with money to fund their terrorism, their attacks that they're currently doing in Ukraine. So this is our way to fight back because we're on the other side of the world.
It wasn't the only way that Daniel chose to fight back against Russia. He chose to also help organize care packages being sent back to Ukraine as part of relief efforts.
Hi, my name is Candace Lipsky. I work on the Saskatoon Morning Show. A story that really delighted me this past year actually started the year before when I first connected with Leanne Benjamin. Now at that time, Leanne had lost a necklace that was incredibly sentimental to her. It was given to her by her husband on their wedding day, but was partly picked out by her mother-in-law. Now at that time, her mother-in-law had passed away and her dad died shortly after, so it was just loss after loss for Leanne and her family. She and her husband took to Facebook, to a lost and found group, to help find the necklace. The posts were shared widely, and they also put up posters throughout the city.
And the community response at that time was pretty incredible. There was a gentleman that volunteered his services with a metal detector and came to our home and voluntarily searched my flower beds in case it had broken and fallen off, and searched the playgrounds that the kids play at. And we kind of gradually accepted the fact that we're not going to get this back.
Now, 6 months later, they had pretty much given up hope of ever finding this necklace when a woman reached out to Leanne, who had found her necklace and had seen one of the posts. I think that just seeing the community come together to find this sentimental necklace for Leanne was just so beautiful and so representative of the amazing community we have here in Saskatoon.
Many of these stories show that community is important to people here. They come together in good times and bad, and often want to give back. In Saskatoon, a South Indian woman is doing just that with a cookbook. Prema Ranganathan has vision loss. She struggles to read and write, so she recited more than 300 recipes by memory to her friend and son.
And a teaspoon of mustard seeds.
The exciting thing about Mom is she knows how to cook these dishes from scratch, and she never references a book. So it's all in her mind and her heart.
The cookbook was published by Canadian poet and social media darling Rupi Kaur. Ranganathan is donating all of the proceeds to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. Stay with us. We'll have more remarkable stories from Saskatchewan after the break. Welcome back. I'm Natasha Lipney, and you're watching a special edition of CBC Saskatchewan, where we're sharing some stories that represent the best of this province. Take Sandy Whitford. She's a Regina senior who drew portraits of all of the children in her neighborhood. Whitford hadn't drawn in 50 years, but she rediscovered her love of the art form when she was sitting by her sick husband's bedside while he was in hospital. There, she drew nurses. Unfortunately, after he passed away, she had to find new inspiration. She had just moved to a new block before the pandemic and found that drawing portraits of the children really brought her and her neighbors together.
She didn't just do one family, but she did all the families, and I just thought that was such a generous use of her time, and we're just so so grateful.
Oh, I'm sort of like the grandma on the street, the drawing grandma on the street.
Enjoy these next few stories from Saskatchewan.
My name is Alex Soladuca, and I'm the social media producer for CBC Saskatchewan, and I also run our TikTok account. One story that stood out to me this year actually came from TikTok. Andrian Makhnachov, a newcomer to Regina, started making videos after fleeing war in Ukraine. His first videos were just about everyday life in Canada compared to back home, and then his taste tests really took off of local favorites like ketchup chips and Kraft Dinner and Nanaimo bars, and we actually treated him to some poutine. Are you excited? How do you feel?
Yeah, finally I will try it. I read a lot of comments, you should try it, real poutine, and finally I will try it today.
Here we go! The thing that really stood out to me about his story is these seemingly fun videos that were actually helping him get through such a difficult time in his life as he settled into a place he had never even visited before moving, and as he worried about family and friends back home in Ukraine. He said on nights when he couldn't sleep, his followers and positive comments would help him get through. So you can see his videos on TikTok, and don't forget to follow us at CBC Sask News.
I'm Samantha Brace, and this year I was a producer for Blue Sky. The story that stood out for me was when I was lucky enough to be able to go to the art exhibit From Deaf Shame to Deaf Same. It was put on by students from Winston Knoll who were telling their experience of growing up deaf in Saskatchewan. So the art exhibit showcased their feeling of isolation in a hearing world to a feeling of acceptance with their classmates and the deaf community.
Accepting my deaf identity is the box that I would identify with, because before, when I came in grade 9, I didn't want sign language, I didn't want a deaf identity. And as I went on later in life, I became more confident with that, and now I am proud to say that I am deaf.
And I work in radio, which is a relatively inaccessible medium for those that are deaf and hard of hearing. So it was really important to be able to tell this story visually. And I'm really happy that I was able to amplify the students' voices, celebrate their resilience, and really show the impact of the deaf and hard of hearing class at Winston Knoll and how it was able to help these students be confident in who they are.
Hello, I'm Brian Enius. One of the stories I did this year that really stood out to me was about Blaine Hodamani from Carry the Kettle Dakota Nation and how a Glad You report changed his life.
Instead of spending the holidays in jail for impaired driving, Blaine Hodamani was allowed to stay home and carry the Kettle Dakota Nation, working and spending time with his family and friends. That's thanks to a Glad You report that was presented in court. It revealed that Hodamani has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and he's also a residential school survivor.
Glad You reports provide vital information about an Indigenous person's history to the courts, giving them a clearer picture of some of the challenges they've dealt with in their lives, like FASD. Sometimes, though, due to delays or a lack of resources, those reports don't happen. My story looked at a unique program in Saskatchewan that's using a team-based approach to write Glad You reports, reduce delays, and change lives.
And I think one of the strongest ways that we can push back against colonialism is to bring families back together.
And for Hodamani, that Glad You report made him realize how his past traumas contributed to his present-day drinking. It helped him serve his sentence in the community and connect with his family in a way he hadn't before.
My name is Dan Zakreski. My strongest memory from 2022 came from an absolutely terrible story. Back at the end of October, Saskatoon police shot and killed a man in a confrontation. Happened in an evening, and I went by the scene the next morning to door knock to see if I could find anybody who would tell me what had happened. Second house I came to, a young woman answered the door holding a baby with her boyfriend standing behind her. She was initially startled to see me. I was just another stranger standing on her step. But after I introduced myself, I asked her if they had seen anything. And she looks at me and said, "My boyfriend and I saw everything. Can I tell you?" And I was just so amazed that she was so willing to share the intimate details of such a traumatic event that had just happened the night before. And it was through her telling of what had happened that it went from being just a story on a news release into something that would resonate with anybody in this city.
I'm Yasmin Ranea, a CBC News reporter in Saskatoon.
One of the stories that stands out the most to me is about a Regina grandmother who lost her 14-year-old grandson, Jake, in a suspected gang killing. It was hard for Brenda Longman-Yeager to talk through her grief, but she found the strength to talk to me and to start her fight to end gang violence in Regina.
I don't want my grandson's life to have ended in vain. I want the community support, whoever is willing to support us.
Jake's tragic death pointed to a much bigger problem. Saskatchewan leads the country in Indigenous homicide rates, and that's why Longman-Yeager started a group called the Matriarchs and Warriors Uniting Against Violence to try and help young offenders. She met with city councillors and the Regina police chief, and the group is working on a bunch of great projects, including getting an addiction treatment center built. It's tremendous what Longman-Yeager is doing, taking a devastating loss and turning it into positive action that helps the community.
Another story comes from Witchican First Nation, where elders honored 7 RCMP officers earlier this year. They gave them each an eagle feather and wrapped them in a traditional star blanket. The community wanted to thank the officers for their efforts to stop drug trafficking in the area. Stay with us. We'll be back with more incredible stories from Saskatchewan after the break. Welcome back. I'm Natasha Lipney, and you're watching Stories of Saskatchewan. As a host and producer, it's not often that I get to go out and gather my own stories, and when I do, it's always a thrill, especially when that reporting takes me to a racetrack. This summer, I had the opportunity to meet Destiny Klim. She's a young Indigenous driver who's making a mark on the industry and inspiring more young women to get involved. But what really captured my attention is Klim's heartwarming relationship with her father, who's also a driver. Here are more stories that illustrate why we love to do what we do.
Hi, I'm CBC Provincial Affairs reporter Adam Hunter. Now, usually I'm covering events down at the Saskatchewan Legislature, but for 1 week this year, I got to cover the festivities leading up to the 109th Grey Cup game between the Argos and the Bombers. And yes, that means sadly, the Riders didn't make it, disappointing their fans, but that didn't mean that it was a disappointing week in Saskatchewan. I got to talk to CFL legend Michael Pinball Clemens, the Argos GM.
This is the epicenter of Canadian football. This is the heartbeat of who we are.
A couple of people with close ties to Saskatchewan, including Richie Hall, the Bombers defensive coordinator who lives in Regina in the offseason.
It's exciting just because it is home.
And Bombers all-star offensive lineman Patrick Neufeld was making a homecoming for the big game. Now, sadly for Hall and Neufeld and the rest of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they couldn't complete the three-peat. The Argos taking a thrilling Grey Cup game, upsetting the Bombers with a game-clinching field goal block in the dying seconds in a game that CFL fans and people in Saskatchewan won't soon forget.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Dan Plaster. I'm a video producer at CBC Saskatchewan. My favorite story this year was called Golden Opportunities. It was a story about the 1952 Indian Head Rockets, and it was an all-black semi-professional baseball team that was recently inducted into the Saskatchewan Baseball Hall of Fame. We were able to catch up with 2 of its living members in Nat Bates and Willie Reed. They are now both in their 90s.
The distance now, it seems far, far away, but when we were younger, this little distance didn't seem as far.
At 90 years old, Willie Reed and Nat Bates move a lot slower these days, but they clearly remember their glory days on the baseball field.
I enjoyed turning the double play.
They've been friends since middle school and have lived in Richmond, California for most of their lives. But still reminisce about a time 7 decades ago when they moved north to play baseball on an all-black team. And they reflected on their time in Canada and in Indian Head and how much fun and how welcome they were in Canada. And it was also about the small town love affair with baseball and the players, and also about the changing times in baseball and racial relations in the United States and Canada. It was a fun story to do.
Hi, I'm Pratish Diallo, reporter here at CBC in Saskatoon, and a moment I'll never forget is the reunion of an Iranian-Canadian mother and her daughter after they were separated for some 20 years. It's a remarkable story of determination and resilience. Surya got separated from her daughter Nahid when she sent her away to school to protect her from the prospect of an arranged marriage. Nahid, whose identity we are protecting, experienced her own struggles, including sexual assault, and became her mother herself. Meanwhile, Surya fled domestic abuse in Iran, landing in Saskatoon as a refugee a decade ago. Ever since then, she has been working tirelessly to bring Nahid to Saskatoon to safety, and that reunion finally happened in late November.
In my life, it was my just wishes and my dream that to attend to the university, and I tried all my best to help my daughters not to be in my situation.
Now that she's in Canada, Nahid says she hopes to continue her education and give her daughter a better future. They're celebrating the first Christmas together in almost 2 decades.
Many of these stories have to do with people coming together, sometimes in the hopes of creating a better future. Our final story has to do with hundreds of Saskatchewan residents who pooled their SGI rebate checks to help buy 600 hectares of endangered grasslands. They called it the Field of Dreams Project. It was their gift to the next generation.
It's an exciting time where people came together from all walks of life and all political stripes, and we just got together and leaving a lasting legacy. And boy, that feels good. It's that feeling you get when you plant a tree or save an important water source, or in this case, we're protecting the grasslands, a piece of the prairie.
Thank you as always for sharing your time with us and celebrating these stories of Saskatchewan.